Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. We have a special guest with us here today. It's Harold Rubens. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Front of house engineer to the stars.
Oh well, okay.
So you're out with the Winter Jam.
Yep.
The big tour.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that. What's happening with the show?
Sure. So it's first time ever that they're doing a 360 setup. So it's all in the round. So it's a great experience. If you're a fan, there's really not a bad seat. You're never really in the back or on the side. So the artist just set up in the middle of the arena, and they'll continuously rotate, and everything is set up all over, screens everywhere. So it's really not a bad experience. So sound and audio and video are band setup, everything. It's a great experience for the fans. So yeah, It's great. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what are the challenges when you have a show in the round like that for front of house, because you're hearing from one position, right?
Correct. Yeah.
But there's sound going all different directions.
Yeah. So a lot of it has to do with the sound system that we have. So we're right now out with the EAW adaptive system, which is the product lines, the Anya, the Anna, and then the auto subs, and then some front fill spilled across the stage. But it's an incredible system. If you're not familiar with it, just go check it out. But it gives us the ability to really, I mean, I've walked this arena now. I think we're on show number 40 out of 44. And so I've had the experience to go up and down and front and back and all the way around, and it's amazing how the system, after you put in all the numbers and everything, and then it does its thing. You know, that's the whatever's happening inside these boxes. Actually, there's quite a bit happening inside these boxes, but the frequency response, the volume, everything is from the very top seat to the very front. It's very, very similar. So it's a great experience. So you don't really have bad sound anywhere. So
Nice.
Yeah.
So are the artists working mainly off in-ears then, so you don't have to worry about monitoring around?
Correct. Yeah. Everybody is on in-ear. So it's a big stage. So you got a 40-foot square in the middle, and then you have 40-foot thrust going out from there. So
Wow.
it's a lot of space that the artist can go cover the entire floor. So that's why when I say it's not a bad experience, if you're on one corner of the arena, they're going to come to you. And if you're on the other side, they're going to come. So you're never really far away. And with the PA, it just really gives us a sense to bring the sound down to an intimate feel. It just doesn't feel like a PA. It's just hundreds of feet away from you. And so it's really consistent all around the arena.
Right. So on a show like Winter Jam, you have a number of different artists. Does each artist have their own front of house engineer, or are you the main engineer? How does that work?
No. So every artist. So there's 10 artists, and 3 artists perform before what we call the lights down. So if the show starts at 7, starting at 6, there's 3 artists that perform with the lights up.
Okay.
And then starting at 7, the lights go down, and there's 7 more artists that perform. And it's a combination. Some of the other, so the artists Newsboys, Danny Goki, Ren Collective, Mandisa, New Song, Holland, Ledger, and then those are the lights down artists. And then lights up artists are Manic Drive, Ty Brazel, and Dan Bremnes.
Okay.
And so some of the later artists, Newsboys, Mandisa, Danny, Rend, New Song, all have their own front of house guys. And then the rest of the artists use the house guy, the system guy, or Jerry Holcomb, who's our production manager. He mixes for New Song. He'll mix some of the other artists.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a combination of some people use the house people, most artists will bring their own.
Right,
So
and you're working with?
I'm out tour managing and mixing Mandisa.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, what does that entail when you say you're tour managing and mixing? Obviously, we know what mixing is, but what does tour managing entail on a tour like this?
So on a tour like this, so there's our big boss that's tour managing the entire tour, right? So he's responsible to get everybody on a tour like this with 10 different artists, So my direct responsibility with Mandisa is to make sure that she's comfortable, she is where she needs to be. There's a couple of responsibilities during the day. Today we have VIPs, we have Q&As, we have all these different things. So getting her ready and to be at a certain place on time, and then her schedule throughout the day, So making sure that dressing rooms, she knows where to go, all these different where she has to be. So that's a lot to do. And then dealing with our particular bus is making sure that our people, I communicate with our people, make sure they're at bus call on time to get on the bus. We have everybody, we get them to the city, get them from city to city. So that's tour managing responsibilities.
Right. So you're kind of handling all of the background stuff, so the artist can just be the artist.
Right. So I'm the liaison between the tour and Mandisa, an artist, and then management to the tour. They communicate with me, and I'll go to her and that kind of stuff.
And then once she's on stage, you're out front running
and
the sound.
So make sure she knows when we have an assistant out with us as well, and she takes care of her. And she basically, I just say, hey, we got to be here. She's here. Here's your mic. Here's your ear pack. Okay, go perform. Go off stage. Go back to dressing room, and we take care of the rest of the stuff. So
right. Nice.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how you arrived at this point.
Sure.
I read somewhere that you kind of got infatuated with audio at a Michael Jackson concert when you were 14 years old. So.
Well, I think everybody has at some point in their life they kind of have that aha moment kind of deal. And so for me, I went to a concert. Obviously, it was a Michael Jackson concert. So, this is back in 1984. And watching this, somewhere in the middle of the sea of people, there was this island of glowing equipment.
Right.
And it was in front of me, and I was kind of drawn to watching people work, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what they did. I don't know what anything was about. I just knew that something was happening there. And I kind of tell that what was happening there had something to do with what was happening on the other side of it was at the Astrodome, in Houston. So, and looking at that after the show, going down there, and with my dad, and what do they do here, and we were talking to the engineer. And he kind of explained something. I can't really tell you what it was that he said to me. The one thing that I would always stick with me, and I'll do for other people, is I won't just get away, kid. He took the time. He explained something to me, and he did this. We do this. We do this. And so, what I know that had transpired right after that is, that weekend I go to church, and all of a sudden there's like, oh, there's a sound person here. Oh, it just like that part of me that was on my radar. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's a sound person here. Oh, big church has a sound person as well, and that started it, mm-hmm. and that sparked my interest. And as time went on, I got involved in that. I started doing it. I started helping out youth and started doing sound. It made sense to me, mm-hmm. And then as I got older, then I started helping out, graduated to big church. and so, that was what started it. That was the first time it got, I was 14 years old, and I got the aha moment that something,
Right.
And man, I started doing it. It made sense to me. I got those, I think it was very important for me, I think at that point, to get those early attaboys. Hey man, you're good at that, or hey man, thanks for doing this, or gave me a sense of an identity, and so, man, I continued with it. I remember going all the way through high school, and the theater department had a sound system. They didn't know what to do with it. They put on plays. Hey, it made sense to me. I figured it out. I wasn't even in theater, but I would do things like that, and. So I just, early on, that was the path. That was the things that I kind of identified with and started doing, and I was good at. And then post high school, I went to, back then I graduated high school in 1990. So, the idea of what Full Sail is now, or these places like that, the conservatory, or some of the programs that we now know about throughout the country, sure. that are you can get full degrees, you can get full, you can come out there certified with all, that didn't exist back then.
Right.
So, or let's just say there wasn't that many of those around. Mm-hmm. So, and then, the one thing I did find, I did find the Art Institute. Mm-hmm. And I was in Houston at the time, and so the Art Institute of Houston had studios, had a music video business program, and that was it. I was led to there, and I did it and graduated from there, and that part of the program, or requirement in the program, was to intern somewhere in the field. Okay. I had a connection with a recording studio in Houston, and I started working, and just it's a story that you always hear. I started with the guy that answered the phone, that didn't take the trash out, that made dubs, and one day the studio owner, a guy named Chuck Sugar, said, "Hey, come in the control room, tell me what you know, or just talk me through this, you know. And so I did. So, well, this is this, and here's how you patch, you know. And it was a very notable studio in Houston. You know, doesn't exist anymore, but big records were being done there at the time. And so we talked about it, and he said, man, okay, well, you already have the alarm code, you know, you already know. So at night, if you want to come in and just don't use the tape machine, don't wear down the heads, you know.
Right,
So that kind of dates you kind of where we were, you know. It's like, you know, he's like, you know, if you want to bring somebody and, you know, practice, you know, this. And so, I mean, at that time, you know, I had the keys to that Cadillac. I mean, it was a Trident Series 80 console, A range, you know, and just mics and just wow. And so anyway, so I got to experiment, you know, and so my early training was studio. Okay. That was really, there wasn't live sound programs, you know. I knew I was always drawn to live audio. I don't know why. I don't know why. Now I understand it, but at the time it was like I knew that's what I wanted to do, but there wasn't like you know, unless you go work at an audio company and work in the shop for, you know, and roll cables for 3 years, and then, you know, those ways. But there wasn't these programs, and so I went the studio route. I learned a lot of valuable skills, a lot of valuable things with some great gear and techniques, and got to watch some great engineers and producers do their work on some great records. And it was just being a fly on the wall in this stuff, you know, and absorbing as much as I could. Graduated from there. I did a stint in radio, so I worked in radio production and commercials and trafficking and promotions and everything I had to do with major market radio. And so at a very early age, like in my 20s, early 20s, I was exposed to a lot.
Right.
Big concerts, studio, radio, so for that time frame, I'm forever grateful. Post that, I went to go work. I got a job at a large church in Houston, and that shaped, I would say that from that point on, I met some friends of mine there that were in a very successful, well, that at that time got signed to a band called Cadence Call, who just blew up. I mean, they were the church college band, and so I was a church sound guy. We started working there, and we just went off and tried to conquer the world. We tried to figure it out. None of us knew what we were doing. We just, okay, you know, part of it was the van tours, and then we got into buses and bigger gear. We didn't know, but we figured it out in the early 90s, you know, and we, and that was it. And that started. I went to work for several other groups, and man, some great names that I got to work with, and here we are now, 24 or 5 years later, and man, still riding it, and still learning.
Right.
Still, that's the thing that I don't think I hope I never lose that, you know, the still wanting to find out about new ways of doing things, talking to people. How are you doing this? How are you not doing this? What did you get with this idea? You know, and I hope that always stays fresh.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the best way to stay on top of things, right?
Yeah.
To keep growing and learning.
Yeah. And you know, and I love my makeup of being able to do live sound, going back in the studio, working in the studio, editing radio shows, doing records in the studio, mixing, doing live, you know. So and I think one feeds off the other. One makes me better at the other one. You know? So yeah. Right. So that's kind of in a nutshell, big nutshell, sure. where I'm at now.
That's a great story.
How I got there.
Great story. Yeah, great background. So how then do you get to the point where an artist like Mandisa and these Stephen Curtis Chapman you've worked with, and Crowder and a variety of really great artists, operating at the highest level, how do you get those gigs? Do they call you? Do you apply for the job?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. It's a question that you get asked all the time. It's like, man, how did you know? So I think that there's a lot that's word of mouth, you know. And so somebody has a need somewhere. We're looking for a production man. We're looking for a front of house guy. We're looking for a guy to fill this role. And they'll just ask. And so then they'll say, oh, this guy's available, or this guy's good. He's done this and this and that. So you're kind of like, you know, I don't know that very rarely do I hear the story of somebody handing a resume and say, well, I've done this. I mean, you know, by the time somebody gives you a call, they're giving you a call because they kind of already known what you've done, you know.
Right.
Now, that's not to say that jobs don't come, at least in the touring industry, don't come. You know, a lot of times what happens is somebody might say, oh, you've worked for so-and-so, or I see that you've worked for so-and-so. That might open a door. Mm-hmm. And when that door opens and you walk through it, you got to know your stuff. You got to, that's your opportunity, you know, because that door can very quickly close, you know. Mm-hmm. And then I think the more important thing is the recommendation that's to come, because that same production manager that opened the door for you, or that same management that said, hey, we'll give you a shot, will probably get another call. Hey, how did Harold work out for you? He did a great job. How did this guy work out? We tried him and he didn't work out, you know. So, you know, and then, so you might get the next call, you may not get the next call, you know. Right. So, but for me is, I think that from early on working with Cadence Call, and they blew up. Their first record did great, and we got paired up with some other great bands in the days of Jars of Clay and bands like that, and we got to tour with that, Michael W. Smith, and you know, the kind of artists that were established and kind of took us under our wing. You know, we kind of went out with them, and then you just start knowing people, and if you're doing a great job, you're doing a good job, and you're getting the results that whoever hires you, you know, is looking for, mm-hmm. then the recommendation is not far behind. If somebody comes to them and says, hey, you know, how did Mitch do on this thing? Well, he did great, man. And, you know, we'll try him out, you know, if you're not working, you know. So, so I think that's how you continue working, you know. Mm-hmm. But I think one other thing is just, one thing I alluded to earlier is just always staying fresh, always staying current. You know, I know a lot of guys that have done it one way, and then they've kind of like, because of other responsibilities, let's say they were great mixers at one time, and then they've kind of became a tour manager or something else and gotten away from staying current, you know, so now they walk up to the current gear, you know, and while they still have the skills, it's a lot harder to get adapted to some of the stuff that's the new stuff, you know, so mm-hmm. Takes a little bit longer. But, you know, all in all, I mean, that's how it's happened for me, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. Okay. You know, you kind of work your way in, and you have opportunities, and you take those opportunities. But that's great. Yeah, that's.
I heard somebody say one time. It said, when you get the call, the answer is yes, and if you don't know what to do, you learn it from the time you get the call till the time you get it. And I know that I've done that. You know, I know that it was a great opportunity, and certainly one that my things inside me is like, man, that might be a little bit over your head, you know. Mm-hmm. And from the time I said yes to the time that the gig came, I worked my rear end off. I mean, I, you know, would go and find an audio company that has a certain console there. Can you tip this over and give me a day on it? Let me work on it. You know, I got to get familiar with all this stuff, you know. And so essentially doing your homework, mm-hmm. you know, so that when the gig comes, you know, it's just like, oh yeah, I know how to do this, you know, I got this. And then the rest of my skills were going to be right there, you know. So I think there's a lot of that, you know. I think drive has a lot to do with it too as well. So
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So we were talking about gear a little bit earlier, and you've mentioned a few times different things. And if I had to label it, I would say you're gear agnostic. You're kind of happy with whatever is in front of you. But some people find themselves very focused on, I've got to have this piece of gear to do this kind of thing. Talk a little bit about that. How you can, what your perspective is on the particular gear.
Well, gear, sure, I have my preferences. And my preferences are basically come from familiarity. So if anybody looks me up, I'm sure they know that I, you know, a lot of times do a lot of things with Yamaha products. Mm-hmm. I am so familiar with Yamaha products. Like, I just fly on them. You know, I actually own one. You know, like, so I own my front of house console, and it's a tool. And a lot of times when I show up and I'm in multiple roles, like, I don't want to have to learn a piece of gear. I just want to flip the desk over. There's my stuff. I want to fly on it, and my time from what I hear to a result on the speakers, it's very minimal, because I'm not like, okay, where's that function on this desk, right? And so do I have preferences because of it makes me better at what I do? You see what I'm saying? Not just so much, like, not just so much on what the gear is, but because I'm so familiar with it, it's just like you're looking for a certain tool in the toolbox, and you're like, oh, it's right there. You grab it, and you're continuing. You're not like, when you have a disorganized toolbox, you're like, where is that, right? This is not the case. I know exactly where all my stuff. And also, I'm also familiar with, yes, I can do this, or no, I can't do this on this console, right? Or whatever. And so you already have your workflow, right? So you don't spend time looking to see if you can do something, or how do you do something. You just know. But I'll also say this. People ask me, what's your favorite console? And I go, the one that's right in front of me.
Right.
It's the one that's in front of me. Is it a Mackie 1402? Okay, that's what I have right now. Is it a Digico SD12? Is it a Yamaha PM10? Is it a whatever it might be? You name them, right? I've used 98% of them. And honestly, why I say that, it's not just to be cheeky about it, but it's to say this is the only thing that's right now available to me to make a difference, to adjust anything, to get this thing. It's not going to be, now sure, do I want to load, walk into something and pop my flash drive in and this console turns in all my settings and my routing and everything? Absolutely. Because in turn it makes my job easier, right?
Right.
But if I don't have that, it's like the guys go, oh, my flash drive, wrong firmware, I won't load, and then we'll just mix the show. Yeah, but my routing, oh my gosh, I don't have this and compressor with this, and and they're like, dude, just mix the show, right? How many times have you and I walked up to a console and be like, okay, here we go,
right?
And you mix a show, right? And so I think sometimes and I don't know why, but today in this day, it feels more and more that you're either this camp or this camp or this camp or this camp. I wish we would get away with that. I wish we would just learn how to use our skills with whatever's in front of me. And I've had to mix every artist, Now, if I have a file for this, sure, I would have preferred to have that console because I would have been playing and then go from there.
Right.
And the times that I didn't, and I had to dial in, it a little more of a struggle because it's like, okay, because not every EQ graphically or sonically reacts the same. So sometimes we have these go-tos. I'll just pull 400 at, right here, but the bell curve is there, so it sounds different. You're like, so anyways,
right.
Preferences.
Sure.
But ultimately, whether it's and the same goes for microphones, the same goes for plugins, the same goes for all that stuff. Sure, I have my preferences because it allows me to just get right to mixing. It's just like you in a studio situation. The guy, so many guys, it's like, hey, just be organized in your workflow. Be organized in your console, how you set up, or your session. Have your templates, like you walk in. So now you just adapt whatever's coming at you to what you're used to, I know you've talked to CLA, Chris Rodalgi,
Sure.
and how he does his things. And a lot of his products, he talks about how, hey, I got these many channels that I mix on, and everything that comes up, he might get a session that's 120 tracks. What those 20 tracks are going to go down to his, 32, 20, whatever his template is, where he's got, sure, here's his kick drums, here's this. And so when he reaches, he knows what he's doing. So he's not trying to find, well, is that the fourth kick drum, or is that, So in the same sense, with the same idea in live sound, we have our preferences, but ultimately I'm just going to use whatever's in front of me, On this tour, I don't have the console that I would say that I would prefer, but everybody's mixing on the same console. It's one console for the entire tour, for everybody. So it doesn't matter. We all have our preferences, but we have this. And so you know what? And you walk up tonight and you're going to go, it's a great show. Right. It doesn't matter. Right. So anyways, that's my answer. I'm sticking to it.
That's awesome. It makes a lot of sense. That's great. That's great. So one of the challenges that can arise in a church situation is the interaction between the people on the stage and the people doing the sound, the front of the house and things, and sound checks and the process of all that. Do you have techniques and strategies for interacting between the performers and the technicians and how you accomplish sound check?
Yeah. I think that I would say this. I'm a people person. People walk up to me. You walked up, I shook your hand. We had a conversation. Jeff walked up earlier, your sales guy, big old hug. Hey, I've known him. You're like, man, we're just people. Like, it's not, those people on stage. If you get in their head and you kind of try to understand whether it's a guitar player or drummer or a vocalist, chances are there's probably some level, just because they're artists, right? There's some level of insecurity there, right? Like, hey, here's how I'm expressing myself, and now I'm going to hand this over to that guy in the booth.
Right.
And if you don't know that guy, right? If you don't know that guy, there's all these questions. Is he good enough? Is he this? Or is he that? What's he going to do? Is he going to make me sound worse? All these different things. Why do we ask those? It's our insecurities. We're just human beings, right? This is what we do. So I think a lot of times getting to know people, breaking that barrier between the booth and the stage and walking up and, hey guys, how you doing? If it's your first time, introduce yourself. Hey, I'm so-and-so, so all this stuff. If it's not your first time, it's your 100th time, do the same thing. Hey guys, how was your weekend? How's your family? How's all these things? Right? Because the more we are at ease with each other, right? Or even if I have to walk up to you, it's like, hey, listen, so on the right side of the stage, your amp's pointing straight out. And it's like, over here is different than over here. Is there any way we can turn it over? Instead of, hey, dude, turn that down, or can we just put a blanket over that? Right. You see the difference?
Sure. Yeah.
Again, back to what we were talking about, the purpose and what we're doing, right?
Right.
If you're approaching it from let's make it better, as opposed to do your job better, or if you would be better, or if you could do it differently. You see what I'm saying? There's a difference in approach. Ultimately, you're going to do the same thing. One way you're going to piss off somebody and not make friends. The other way you're going to be you're going to make a friend and earn a trust of somebody that says he's got my back out there. It happens in live audio too, not just in church. In live audio, I've seen house guys, right, that are very talented. When I say a house guy, if you walk up to a festival, there's a guy that's in charge of the whole day. He's running front of house, right? Now, bands will bring in their own engineers, right? But the house guy is still in charge of the system and plugging everybody in, and sometimes even mixing some artists, right?
Right.
And a lot of these guys I know, and they're all very seasoned engineers, and they're good in their own right. Just because they're not traveling with an artist, they might be working for a production company, doesn't necessarily mean anything. But yet sometimes that artist will feel a lot more comfortable with their own person, right? Because there's a relationship there. It has nothing to do with skill level, because this guy, in some situations I can go, I know this guy can mix the pants off of, he's really good, he's very experienced. But there's so that artist doesn't know.
Right.
And so it's I don't trust that guy, or it's not trust because I don't know that he knows me. And so back again to the relationship. So I think back to the theme of what we were talking about is that it's not necessarily about gear, it's not necessarily about the microphone you're using, it's not necessarily about all these different things. I think it's more about having a relationship with somebody. There's a bigger purpose of what we're doing. Maybe we're doing it through I'm being an audio guy and you're an artist.
Right.
But ultimately it's just about us connecting in some way and trying to create a bigger thing, a music, something that'll move some emotion or tell some story or paint a picture and something that may speak to somebody, and somebody be like, the ripple effects that can happen out of us just having a good relationship.
Right.
And then we're doing it through music or through audio or through whatever. You see what I'm saying? So
Sure.
I think that's the bigger story.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So my last question for you is something that I've just always wondered. Who sets the volume level? Who says you can mix to this level, whether you're in a church, whether you're in a tour, whether you're in a big, with multiple artists like this? I would assume there's some overriding, somebody saying you could do this.
That's an interesting question. That's a thing that's been debated for years to come, and it will continue to be debated. So let me. This conversation might go all over the place because I've been in situations where I've walked into somewhere. So a lot of times I get brought into a situation where, at a church will hire me as a consultant or come in and help train our staff or those kind of things like that. And so, if you talk to the leadership, they'll be like, yeah, we've had volume issues. It's just too loud and all this. And you go talk to the sound guy. I was like, hey, so what are you mixing at? And they're like 95 A-weighted or something like that. And you're like, yeah, okay. yeah, they want me to be down like at 90, or I'm like, oh, that's pretty hard, like, I mean, and then you listen to what's coming off stage, there's all these factors, and we get into the numbers where it's got to be right here, or there's the pastor's wife with the dB meter from Radio Shack, the old ones, like, or there's like, or God forbid, there's a guy with the iPhone app, oh my gosh, those are like, it's 140 in here. It's like, no, we wouldn't be talking right now, like, and so you have all these things. We get caught up in these numbers, and all these things. And I think that, ultimately the volume issue, I think a lot of times a lot of those problems tend to be mix issues than volume issues. Because now that's not a big blanket golden statement like here's the rule, right? In most of the situations that I've walked into, the PA or the mix was very harsh, very, like, because at some point somebody made some comment, oh, turn the subs off or whatever, like there's no warmth in the system, like, the curve on the room is very high-endy, so like nobody wants to listen to 90 dBs of, 8K.
Right.
Like, please stop, right? But 90 dBs at, 1K and below is like, that's not that big a deal, like, I mean, you get what I'm saying, right?
Sure.
So where we are and how sensitive our ears to certain frequencies and stuff, I think the more you understand that, and that comes with experience and that comes with education. But I think a lot of times we walk into these situations and they're just like vocals are screaming, and the mix is not good. And so people are like, they're listening to this and it's coming out, And also I think a lot of times the conversation we have is, oh, we can't hear that, turn that up. Oh, we can't get it, turn that up. And so the engineer, it's like, okay, because he's told by, the message from the pastor or whatever it might be, and whatever the lines of communications are, and we just start turning up when the ideal is like, hey, what, if you just bring this pad down, it would clear up the vocals and they would just shine, and there was some space in the mix for that. So you really didn't increase just by lowering something, you made space, like those kind of conversations. And that's why I think that, again, back we were talking about, it's not really about whether you have a Digico SC12 or PM10 or an X32 or whatever it might be. Those same principles apply. I've walked up to a church on an X32 and it's like, well, let's learn how to mix. Okay, let's talk about the principles. Gain structure, how to EQ things, balance, is your PA set up right? How does that sound? That's the canvas we're painting on. Right. Those things, like, so I think it's very easy to get caught up in the individual gear, and but more so I think we were talking about the volume issue. Like if you go tonight, like when we do the show tonight, I mix at a certain level that I just don't. I'm not the guy that's going to mix at 110. I'm not. I have a dynamic mix, so there's pops and quiet, and I think all these things. And so there's a certain level I like to mix at, and it feels good, and there's dynamics, it has rooms to breathe, it's not everything smashed up to the top, There's some parts in the show that are a lot louder than me. There's some parts in the show that are not, it just depends. And so, and every artist walks up and goes, this is where I feel my artist should be, so, and it hasn't gotten out of hand. I've been on other tours where it has gotten out of hand, and it's just like, man, like I've seen people just been walking out, and it's like, are you going to say something? Somebody going to say something to this guy, and
right.
And the leadership of the tour will, go try to address that, and for the greater good.
Right.
But as far as setting the volume, who sets the volume? I remember I worked at a large church in the Houston area, North Houston area, and man, we got to. I mean, it was kind of, we wanted at this level. We want to feel, we want the music to just envelop you, like we want this feeling of it. And I remember we would have conferences or something like that, and even in talking to other visiting engineers, so I was like, hey man, you guys, it feels good in there. It feels like a kind of a concert. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of like, well, this is kind of where they want it, But at the same time, that was the culture that they wanted to create, this kind of feel in music and volume level. But I guarantee you that if the mix was harsh, not pleasing, unbalanced, the wrong things were being accentuated, then it would be like, we got to we got to bring it down, you know. It also been in situations where I've walked in as a consultant with a church, and it's like, hey, we just can't go over 94, or we can't go over, and there was a number. Right. And nobody really understands what that number is, or even if that unit that they're using, the number is even calibrated or whatever, or what that thing is measuring, but they know that's a number. But that number, I think in a greater conversation, I think if you've been around it long enough, you can, you know that, again, back to what we were talking about relationships, I think that number represents something. Like it may not be, let's just say 94 is not really what you're trying to say, and it's not really about a number. You're saying, we have a bigger issue. It's too loud in here. Okay, let's figure out what's too loud. Why do you think it's too loud? Right. Because the numbers that you're giving me, it's not technically on a scale. They're not loud. Something else is happening. Let's figure that out. You know, and right. The easiest thing is somebody who doesn't know how to communicate that is like, turn it down. And sometimes it comes as a mandate. And then once we get to that point, I think we're on a healthy place. Mm-hmm. Turn it down. I'm telling you to turn it down. You know, and then I'm going to stick somebody down there with a meter and don't let me see. Or to this day, let's see. Oh, at the end of I know at church that the guys like called me about setting up how to log his SPL level throughout a service because he had to turn it in. Wow. And I was like, okay, are we open to a conversation? Because I think there's a bigger issue here that if that's the deal, something else is happening. If we've gotten to that place, right? You know. Yeah. So, I think ultimately. What we do, whether it's audio, whether it's you're an artist, whether you're a lighting guy, whether you're a video guy, however you serve the event that you're in, whether it's church, whether it's a concert, a mainstream concert, whatever corporate show, I think that once you realize that you're dealing with other people and the healthier you are with your relationships with other people and how you communicate, and then that ultimately it's not about, you know, that particular. Now, sometimes it's very real, like that a particular gear is needed to do a certain function, and that's right. Very accurate. You know, that's very a good thing to do. But I think that ultimately we make it much more important than it really is. Right. You know, yeah. And I think walking away and going, hey, Mitch, it was a great time, man, great event, great, awesome, and walking away with that, it's a lot better than, you know,
we were fighting about volume.
Nailing the perfect plug-in with the right. Perfect preset for the best snare sound that day. Nobody's going to walk away going, that snare was amazing.
Right,
you
right.
know, but
awesome.
Anyway, that's it. Yeah.
And it's so much good stuff. Thank you
yeah.
for sharing your experience and your wisdom.
Thanks, man.
Pleasure to meet you.
Absolutely,
and,
absolutely.
Congratulations on all your success. And,
Thank you.
Yeah, please do come back.
Oh, man, I'd love to be back. Thank you, guys. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for educating and spread the good news. So
thank you. Thank you very
awesome.
much.
Yep.
Great. And thank you for joining me here. I'm Mitch Gallagher from the Sweetwater Minute.